Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Sally Holt, and Sally is the founder of Knit Companion. And for those of you who haven't heard about Knit Companion, Sally, describe to us quickly like what this app is.
Yeah. Hi, Irina. Thank you so much for having me. So Knit Companion is fundamentally an app to help you keep track of where you are as you're following along in a pattern. And it has lots of different tools. We'll talk about some of them today, but it has lots of different tools that helps you keep track of the row that you're on, maybe where you are along that row, especially if it's long and complicated. It's got counters and the ability to provide you like reminders for shaping as you go row to row. Um, it's got a lot of intelligence built into it, so it can discover the charts that you have. And within those charts, it can find and color and count the stitches that you have. And we'll maybe take a look at that a little bit later today as well. So it's got kind of this whole suite of capabilities for helping you keep track of where you are in your patterns. And really the goal with Knit Companion, when I first started the app back in 2011, when we were first starting development, and we released it in 2012, in that summer of 2012. And I really felt like for that first year or two, that it was really an app that was targeted at a fairly sophisticated knitter who was knitting already some pretty hard stuff. You can see like stuff behind me that's like cables and color work. And I was kind of like, well, that's really what the app is targeted for. But as I've matured and kind of what I've been doing over the last decade, more than a decade now, and as I've worked with more and more customers, I really think it's an app. You need some basic skills. You need to be able to cast on and knit and purl and be far enough along that you're following a pattern. But once you're kind of in that beginner knitter stage, just past the beginner stage, it's really something that I think is helpful for anyone who is interested in expanding their knitting skills, because the whole purpose is to take that kind of fumbling, tracking stuff and
Mhm.
take care of that for you so you can really focus on what you're doing. So when I was starting to knit and I did my first lace pattern, one of my biggest, it wasn't hard lace, but one of my biggest challenges is it was the scarf. And so I knit across the row. I do whatever across the row. And then I had to put everything down, and I had a magnet board thing. So I had to like shift that magnet. And if it got off, I was new. I wasn't good at reading my knitting. If it got off or got knocked or I didn't move it quite right or got distracted while I was moving it, it was like, oh my God, I don't even know which row I was on or where I was. And it just eliminates all of that kind of extra stuff that you would have to do as you're learning a new technique, and just makes it easy for you to focus on what you're doing. And then, even now, I'm pretty good at lace and I'm pretty good at color work. And it just lets me kind of, what I like to do is kind of zen out and really be able to make pretty much everything that I knit TV knitting, so that, and it really helps me do that. And I can talk a little bit about how that works too when we
Well,
get into
before we
this.
go into the nitty-gritty of the app,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about you and your story and how you found yourself needing this app.
So, as a kid, and I think this is gonna jive with a lot of people out there. So, as a kid, my mom was a crocheter, and our neighbor that was one of my mom's best friends was a little older than my mom, so she was more like grandmother age when I was a kid. And so she was a big crocheter and also a big knitter, and so my mom was also a big sewer and quilter. So, as a kid, I learned how to do all of that stuff. And then I didn't, I got into high school. I got super busy. I didn't really do a lot of handcrafts. I went to college and university, got a degree in computer science, was on that kind of tech path, and really wasn't doing anything with handcrafts or anything like that. And then with my career in technology, I was working a lot of, Silicon Valley tech companies. I was doing a lot of traveling to different customers all over the world. And those plane flights were killing me because they were 15 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, and they were just killing me. And so I would, you get on a flight from LA to Singapore, right? Nothing to do with knitting. You get on a flight from LA to Singapore, and it's a 20-hour flight, depending on what's happening with the wind. 20 hours, right? And it's like, so you can eat your fancy meal, drink a drink, watch a movie, read a book, go to sleep, get 8 hours of sleep if you can do that on an airplane. Get 8 hours of sleep, wake up, and you're halfway there. Right? It's like, okay. So so I kind of started, I had a few health issues right around that time. And as I was kind of coming out of those and that was resolving itself, I started just casting around for other things to do. And I actually picked knitting back up. I couldn't tell you what it was that made me think, oh, this would be fun to try. But I was at like Joann's or Michael's and I bought actually Donna Dracunis. She's a designer. She's been around forever. I bought her book on knitted rugs and I was like, oh, maybe I'll knit a rug. And I hadn't picked up needles since I was probably 11. So anyway, so I bought some yarn that was totally inappropriate for a rug and I knit a bunch of squares. And of course, it was a modular rug. So like it was just different squares in different colors. And of course, you know, I was a beginner. So one of my squares came out super tight gauge, super small. And then others came out really big. And so, you know, I didn't keep any of that stuff. And I was talking with Donna, the designer. I was talking with her, you know, years after that experience. And she was like, you should have kept them. I'm like, well, they wouldn't fit together. She goes, you could have made pillows. And I was like, ooh, she's right. I could have made pillows. So anyway, so I started knitting. And what happened was I wanted my knitting to be portable, but I started to get better and better at knitting. So I wasn't knitting a garter stitch scarf anymore. I wanted to follow a pattern. And now all of a sudden you're sitting on an airplane with a magnet board or something with like washi tape on it in a thing. And then you're trying to juggle all this stuff. And now you've got to put everything down and your ball of yarn is like going down the aisle and you're trying to change which row you're on and catch your yarn and not lose your spot. And so that was maybe 2007, 2008. In 2009, I went to Sock Summit and it was in Portland. And it was the first really big fiber convention. I'd been to like local yarn shop had smaller things for just smaller groups of people, but I went to this Sock Summit thing and I signed up. I did the typical thing where I signed up for I crammed my schedule full of classes, signed up for all this stuff, was so tired. So anyway, at this, I saw people, there were no iPads at the time. There were those old original black and white Kindle book readers. I don't know if you can remember those Kindle book readers. You could get a couple of different pattern books on those Kindle book readers. But of course, they didn't have any way to keep track of where you were. So I saw people with that, and they were actually taking washi tape and sticking it on the screen of their Kindle reader to try to keep track of where they were as they were reading. And they were all like, oh, this is so cool. And the pattern is digital. And then I just have my washi tape. And they're like, and then if I want to switch to reading a book, I can read a book. And it's so cool. And I was like, you know, that is actually really interesting, but I'm not sure what I think about sticking that sticky stuff on a screen, right? And those original Kindle books were really low resolution, like really grainy. And I was like, I'm just not sure what I think about any of that. And so it was really good timing though, because I believe it was 2010 that Apple came out with the iPad. And there wasn't Android tablets at the time. That was really the first truly functional tablet that had tons of capabilities. It had a nice screen. And now we would look at those original iPads and be like, oh my God, they're heavy and they're slow and they're okay. But at the time, it was pretty cool, those original tablets. And Apple did this thing where they took a whole bunch of the tools they had developed for Mac computers, including a bunch of PDF support, and they put it native onto the tablet and opened it up so that people who could write computer code could use all of those libraries however they wanted. And that really made it possible for me to say, okay, so there's Ravelry. We've got all these patterns that are PDFs. And now Apple's provided us this really functional, full color, bright screen, beautiful with all these tools. And so I have a business partner. He's up in Canada, and anyone who's coming to Nash Yarn Fest is potentially going to get an opportunity to meet him. So that's just a plug for, we're going to be at Nash Yarn Fest in March.
Is that your elf on the shelf?
That's my elf on the shelf. Yeah. So the two of us together have been running this business. And so He's purely technical. He does not know that much about knitting. So it's been an experience for him as I try to teach him about the knitting concepts. And we'll talk about that a little bit, how important it is to really understand the complexity of what you're trying to address when you make an app for knitting and crafting. Because I see a lot of apps out there and I'm like, wow, you have no idea what people do with these. So he's my elf on the shelf. I have some friends who have been friends since before I started Knit Companion, and they're knitters, and they were around for the very beginning genesis of Knit Companion. They gave me these super cool, the elf made me do it. I don't know if you can see that. The elf made me do it napkins. So they're my Christmas napkins. But anyway, so I have a business partner, and we kind of looked at, what we needed the tools to do. And by that time I was a pretty good knitter. So we kind of knew basically some of the advanced capabilities we needed the tool to do. So we released the first version in that summer of 2012. And it was both good. There were things about it that still live and exist in the current version of the app. And there was stuff that was really bad. And so the app, like over the years, has completely changed and evolved. But we got it right enough. So one of the things when you're making anything, you have to get it for your first release. You have to get it right enough that it's the right thing. And then you need to constantly refine as you go.
When you were doing the refinement, was that based on your experience, or were the users coming to you with the suggestions and ideas?
Yeah, it was definitely both. So a prime example, the very first version of the app really didn't have any support for written pattern instructions. And that was all on me because I'm dyslexic, and I never used written instructions. I went right from like garter stitch and stockinette to lace with a chart and cable with a chart. I just skipped over written instructions because that was just too many words. It was too many like assembly code, right? Like all these little, I'm a programmer, so all these little bits of abbreviations in a row. And my brain was just like, ugh. And so I was like, who would ever use that? And I always skipped right to charts. So one of the things that was not great in the first version of the app is it really didn't have any support for written instructions at all. So that got added later, and it got added because customers were like, I don't use charts. And I was like, I don't understand.
I mean, is that difficult to hear critique of your baby, your idea, right? Like you worked on it, you're thinking, this is it, this is perfect. And then somebody comes
it was awful. So when we released the first version, the first 24 hours. So first of all, it was crashing all the time because people were putting PDFs in there that were, those original iPads didn't have that much like memory and horsepower. So we gave them a bunch of tools to do stuff. And the people who could figure the tools out just were like putting in all this stuff that now is not a big deal. But back then was like a super big deal. So the apps were crashing. We were able to crash a whole iPad back that first couple of months. It was iOS 4, in case anyone's keeping track. It was iOS 4 something. And Apple didn't really release good memory management until iOS 5. And so I mean, it was a disaster. And then I thought the app, I had all my tech experience in selling software and working with customers had been business to business. So my customers for couple, 3 decades had been people who also had computer science degrees. And so, of course, we release a consumer product and it's got, subpar documentation, and it doesn't have any videos to teach you how to use it. And it's actually pretty hard to use. It was like the first version of the app was like incredibly difficult to use. And so, the first 6 months were really, really tough. They were really tough. I had a really popular blogger at the time write one of the worst things that like personally affected me ever. And I still won't read her blogger.
I mean, it's like I find it all the time, and it's on a smaller scale, but like every super negative comment takes me out of circulation somehow. And I can have, like, if you look at my channel's analytics, I can have 99% positive atmosphere on the channel all the time, but it's that one gonna like really,
it's the one.
gets to you.
And the one nasty comment keeps me up for a week. It keeps coming at 2 a.m. I'm up thinking about that horrible thing that person said. And
But it's also like,
I don't think it's hard. I think a lot of times people, and I'm not sure even the comment is wrong. I don't think that blogger was wrong when she was like, this app can't even mirror. It can just rotate. What were they even thinking? And okay, that's not wrong. And we mirror now, right? But I don't sure people think when we're in this like interactive social media world, reviews on Amazon, whatever, people don't realize how much there's another person on the other side of that. We think it's just a nameless, faceless corporation on the other side of that. And at least in this industry, where we're all a bunch of small business people, right? Like there's very few big corporations. It's just a bunch of small business people. I'm not sure people really think about the fact that there's actually another person on the other side that has to absorb all that negative energy and then figure out you can't put that back out in the world. So you just have to kind of suck it in and find a way to give it off.
I want to just make one thing clear,
Mm-hmm.
that basically you don't even have to pay for the app. Like there is a basic portion of
Right.
it that's free, right? So people
Right.
criticizing a free product that you
Oh,
spend
yeah.
months and months putting together.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's certain app stores where I barely look at the reviews. I'll go once every 18 months and reply to a flurry of them, get it over with in a couple hours, and then not look at it again. Because it's like, you're right. It's, I'm, and a few times I just can't. And I say things like, it really sounds like Knit Companion isn't a great fit for you. Please move on, because I have a thing I'm doing here that is a fit for the people I'm working for. And that's that's taken me a long time to learn how to not absorb that and really have it like ruin my mental state. Right.
No,
That's been a tough.
I honestly have times when I have to take 5 minutes break before answering the comment just to sort of meditate and get ready for the answer.
Yeah.
To stay polite about it,
Yeah.
Okay, you were in the corporate environment. You didn't need to take all this stress and negativity on yourself.
No.
Were there times
and that was a shock. That was a shock to me. Yeah.
Well, were there times when you were like, what am I doing? Like, let me do my job and do my 9 to 5 and my 20 hours of now need and not just teaching.
So for the first 5 years, I kept I call it a soul-sucking day job. And I won't say where I worked, but I called it a soul-sucking day job. And I kept my day job and full-time on Knit Companion. So it was like 2 demanding full-time jobs. And it actually made me quite sick. I got quite sick. I got like problems. And I ended up saying, I can't keep doing this. And so I went to my husband, who's been very sweet. And I was like, so I think I have something here, and it doesn't make any money, because we didn't make any money until COVID. We made nothing. And now we have enough to keep the lights on, and I actually can draw down a salary, and the elf can draw down a salary. But for a long time, we didn't have any money. We were barely able to pay for Ravelry advertising and, the little bit of hardware that we needed. So I went to my husband and I was like, I think I have something here, but I physically and mentally am unable to do both things. So if I'm going to do this thing, I have to quit my day job. And if I can't quit my day job, if we as a couple don't think that's the right thing to do, then I need to stop doing Knit Companion, because I can't keep doing both. It's going to kill me. And no exaggeration, I was getting sick. And so he was like, well, okay, give it a shot, And so we'd been kind of saving for a while to kind of be able to cover stuff. And so I quit my day job. And so in the early days when it was really bad, I always had a mental fallback of, if this doesn't work, I still have my job. If this doesn't work, I still have my job. And so then when I quit my job, I didn't have a job anymore, and it had to work. But I will say, quitting my full time like paying job and going full time on a companion is what made the app what it is today, usable the way it's usable today with all of the fancy stuff that it can do today. Because when I quit my job, I was able to devote a lot of time that I wouldn't have had otherwise to running classes. So I ran knit companion classes at local yarn shops. I did WebEx. It was way before COVID. So I did WebEx. Zoom wasn't a thing. So I did all of these classes online at shops, at festivals. And I was able to, with those classes, see what was causing people problems in the app. Like that navigation, that's not working. And that flow there, that's not working. And this is way too hard to explain to people. And oh, if we could only do this other thing, it would make this part easier. And so we did a complete redesign of the app that released in 2018. So it took us a couple years because we rebuilt the app from the ground up, did a complete redesign of the app and incorporated a ton of those things. And then the other thing that happened, it was the summer of 2019, is I actually had the ability to go to the Apple headquarters in Cupertino and spend 2 weeks with a bunch of Apple engineers, UI people, like all of these guys and girls that really live and breathe user interface stuff. And they live and breathe technology like iCloud and all of this stuff. And so that was between the ability to kind of figure out usability wise, just by working with customers constantly hands-on, and then going to the Apple thing, like the app now, it's pretty amazing what it can do. And we'll maybe take a look at that, but it's got this like automatic chart detection. You don't have to crop your charts and count your rows and stitches. It like does it for you. And the magic markers and stuff. I mean, it's pretty cool what it can do now. So quitting my job and going full time was critical. That would never be what it is today if I had continued to try to do two things at once. There would have been no way to do what I did. So,
how did you go about marketing the app besides doing those classes? Like, what other ways did you use to market it?
Yeah, marketing's really hard. Reaching
Especially
people.
Because knitters are like such creatures of habit, right? Like we used to printing out or like penciling down and things like that.
Yeah.
How do you convince somebody who've done it all their life like that to try?
Yeah. And so because we got a couple of fundamental things right from out of the gate, we have a core group of people who've been around since 2012 who were evangelists for us, just regular people. I don't pay them. And a lot of times I really only know them from Ravelry. I've never met them in person. And so that was helpful because they were evangelists for us. I didn't have a lot of resources, especially for even like the first 10 years or so. I didn't have a lot of resources. So a lot of my marketing, I paid for Ravelry advertising. I hardly ever went for print advertising. I've only run print advertising the last couple of years in print magazines, just because it wasn't a great fit. I had been going to Madrona. I don't know if you know about Madrona. So it's not around anymore. It's now branded as Red Alder. But back in the day when it was branded as Madrona, those were a couple of the first fiber festivals I went to and had a booth and could show people stuff, like kind of what it did. And I went to Rhinebeck. So I had some friends who had a booth at Rhinebeck, and they let me kind of share in their booth expense and provide some knit companion demos at Rhinebeck. And so, my marketing was very limited. And one of the things, COVID was awful and it made all of us stay home, but it did open up the door to be able to do like the Vogue, virtual Vogue stuff, and Stitches had a Stitches at Home. And that first year of COVID, I did a lot of that for marketing. And it was basically intro classes, right? I would run 3 or 4 intro classes during that weekend. And it was really good because people finally, one of my problems, anytime I go to a festival or even a chat like this is how do you get someone to sit for more than 35 seconds, right? And you know what? The value prop of Knit Companion, I have not found a way to make it obvious why it's such a great app in 35 seconds. And I kind of honestly think knitting's just one of those things where if you're really going to have an app that's really going to add a ton of value, or really any tool that's going to add a ton of value, it's maybe one of those things that's always going to take more than 35 seconds to kind of talk about and show. So that was helpful with COVID to have people kind of sitting still. And then I have to give a shout out to Stacey Perry at Very Pink, because right before COVID hit, that fall of 2019, she picked up Knit Companion and started using it, and ended up doing the very first video that she did. She's got actually a whole bunch of video classes now on Knit Companion, but she did that first video, and that was maybe the single most impactful and beneficial piece of marketing. It's more than marketing, but that has ever happened for my company in terms of like getting out and reaching people in a way where they were like, oh, now I get why to use it. It's a 15-minute video though. It's not a 35-second video. It's a 15-minute video.
And I watched it, and I find it interesting that I've heard a lot of that being said at HH Americas last year, when they were saying that the new way to market things is through YouTubers and through the social media influencers, because people believe them much more than some paid advertisement in a magazine, because this is like a personal opinion on your app, let's say, where they show you the features they find useful, and people react to that much more.
Right. And I think, there's definitely a culture in the crafting world where we listen to podcasts while we're working on stuff, whether they're video podcasts or audio-based podcasts. We listen to those and, kind of pay attention to them while we're knitting. And I do think that that's, at least for me, it provides a time frame to be able to go into the depth of what it really means and the benefits of what it can offer, because it's very hard to stick that in a time slot, right? So when I finally did some print advertising in like Pom Pom and Vogue Knitting magazine, when I did print advertising, it was super hard. So like behind me is a graphic. It was a long time for me to come up with a visual image that I felt like conveyed at least some of the benefits in still format, in still photo format, right? And so that's what's behind me right now. And still, people are flipping through a magazine. In order to even have that impact, you have to stop and look at it. And you have to look and say, oh, wait, I'm not mirrored right now. But so, that's counting 6. Oh, how did that happen? Oh, that's a video. Oh, I see. There we go. That's a video, right? That someone's watching. And, oh, she changed the colors in that chart. They used to be this and now they're that. Like that stuff is, I struggle with how to convey that in a still photo or in a 30-second kind of spot on YouTube or something.
Okay,
so
Sally, since we're not pressed for time, how about you show us a little bit around the app and show us more than 5 seconds.
All right, so you should be able to, at this point, see my screen. And I've got a couple patterns that I'm going to kind of start with here, and then we'll see what the timing is, and maybe we'll start something from scratch. But when we're talking about kind of the benefits of what Knit Companion can do for you, I'm going to go into this Celtic sweater. And so here it's this cabled sweater. And on the screen here, I can see the current row. I'm currently on row 9. And I can kind of see that over on the right side there. And I can see the current row is bright. And if I look down to the bottom here, I can see this is a sweater. It's a bottom-up sweater. I can see here on this row, I need to do some waist shaping, because I started down at the hips and now I need to kind of narrow it in for the waist. So I've got some waist shaping down here that I have to do a decrease 1 stitch at the end of the row. So I've got my waist shaping that I have to do as I work on this row. And I can kind of see as I look down here that I'm on the 3rd of 8 of my waist decrease steps. I've got some bust increases. They haven't started yet. They're going to go when I'm 13 inches from my cast on edge. So what happens if I tap on my little row marker over here that says 9, it actually says, ooh, make sure you check off this step. So for anyone who has knit something where they need to place a buttonhole every X rows, and then they need to do shaping, and there's kind of a cadence that happens, and they're maybe keeping hash marks on a piece of paper, you know, if you've ever forgotten to place that buttonhole, you get 5 rows up, and then you're like, oh, I forgot to place that buttonhole. Do I frog back? We're like, what do I do about the fact that I forgot to place that buttonhole? Or I forgot to do that decrease a few rows ago. This is going to stop you from going forward until you check off that step. And you can have as many steps down at the bottom as maybe happen on that row, and they don't have to be happening at the same cadence or anything. So I'll go ahead and check that off, and then we can continue to work our way up.
This waist shaping, for instance, is that part of the pattern, or do you have to put it all together before you start knitting that chart?
Yeah, so it is. That's a great question. So usually it's part of the pattern. The designer, when they design the sweater, they'll give you a chart for like the front, and then they'll say, at the same time that you're knitting this chart, they'll give you a setup row or two. They'll say, at the same time you're knitting the chart, you know, read ahead, because you have to do all of these at the same time instructions, right? And you'll just keep doing them as you're working through the chart. As for how you get that into Knit Companion, you've got a couple of choices. So I'm gonna, this is already pre-set up. I'm gonna just go ahead and close this project. You can bring your patterns in directly from Ravelry or Etsy or any source that has your pattern. Even if the pattern's on a blog, you can turn that into a PDF and bring it in. And we give you a whole bunch of tools. And I'll start, at least today, showing you some of those tools for getting started when you have just a PDF that you want to work from, and how you start to put those things together so that you get those reminders and the one-tap marker and all of those kinds of things. We also offer a whole host of what I call Casey design. So we started this a long time ago, but we have now partnered with over 150 designers to offer their patterns pre-formatted in Knit Companion, if you will. So I have a couple of tech editors who work with me who will actually go through the patterns and format them into every size, the options, the shaping. All of that setup work is done for you, and you can basically just create a project in it. So I've got the Dizzy Diamond socks here from Carolyn Lizzle, and I'll go ahead, and when you use a Casey design, like this is what the original PDF looked like, right? Materials and sizing and techniques, and then the toe, these are the instructions, and it's not formatted at all for Knit Companion. But when you're using a Casey design, I'll just give it a name. You pick your size and any other option. So I'll go ahead and pick guided charts, and you say knit now. And that's going to produce a project for you where everything is already set up like it was for the Celtic chart. So here's my toe instructions, and it's got a one-tap marker. If it had any kind of shaping reminders, the keys are down here at the bottom. If it had any kind of shaping reminders, just like that Celtic sweater pattern did, it would be there. And everything's kind of pre-formatted for me. So when we first started back in 2011, 2012, I was like, I need an app that has all the tools in it so that I can pick up any pattern and use all of those tools that Knit Companion is going to offer with any pattern. Because I want to be sitting at knit night, really like what my neighbor's making, and then be able to put that in my app, use the tools, and make it. And we call those the setup tools and the edit tools. And we'll see those in a little bit. So I really wanted that to work with any pattern. So that's where we kind of started. So even today, everything we do starts with those tools and making those tools accessible and usable for everybody to use with any pattern. And then we started our program for Casey Designs, where we have this partnership with designers. My tech editors actually use exactly the same tools that you can subscribe to as an end user. And they use those tools to set up the patterns. So we're kind of drinking our own champagne, if you will, where we use the same tools that we provide to our customers to create the KC designs. So ultimately, you can start from a PDF and do the setup yourself, or you can start from a KC design and have everything set up for you. And it's just a matter of where you start your project from in terms of how far along it is in being kind of sucked into the Knit Companion tool set. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
All right. All right, so let's go back to the Celtic sweater here. So we have our chart. And, you know, one of the things that starts to kind of be a drag with charts, and I said earlier in this how much I love charts and how I skipped right over written instructions. But one of the things that's a super drag is, well, how many pearls do I have in a row? And let me just go up. I'm actually going to frog backwards to and where we were before, just to get something interesting, right? So how many stretches of pearls do I have there, right? And before I have a knit stitch between those cables, like how many do I do? And you have to kind of stop and count, and it's kind of an annoying thing that you have to do with charts. So one of the first kind of, I'll call it artificial intelligence because it is, but it's not this generative AI stuff. It's not, we don't need that. It's a different kind of artificial intelligence, but I can just pick a sample. So let me delete that and do that again. So in Magic Markers, I can just pick a sample of a purl stitch and then tap this wand and it finds all of them in the chart.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can say, I want to see how many there are.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. And I can change the color. I can, of course, make things whatever color that I want. So now when I go back to knit, I have 10 pearls. Before that, a couple of knit stitches. And then at the end, I've got 10. Right.
You know what the funny part, like when I was knitting this specific shawl, the chart was enormous. And if you see all the knitted space before the heart, around the heart, I had to physically sit and count how many stitches are there before the heart design starts. That would have been...
Before I had Knit Companion, I attempted to make... her name is Sharon Winsauer. She's Crazy Lace Lady. And she does a lot of that large scale picture lace where you're making a picture of a horse or a picture of a dragonfly, whatever. And I attempted one of those. And it was before we had Magic Markers in Knit Companion. And I went half mad counting purl stitches. Her pearls are dashes. And I went just insane. Every row took so long because I was always stopping to count. So I actually gave up on the project. And then after we introduced Magic Markers, I went back to it and I was like, I can't believe how easy this is now. This is just ridiculously easy. And it really turns, I mentioned earlier that, you know, it's kind of my goal to make the tracking easier. And this is one of the things I'm talking about, where it becomes TV knitting. I don't have to stop and count. It's just there. Right. And if I'm doing lace, even if it's not picture lace, it's so much easier for my brain to remember what the pattern is. Like we all get into this 1, 2, 3, knit 2 together, 1, 2, 3, 4, SSK, yarn over, did it. We like get a little pattern in our head about what the pattern is for that row. This makes it so much easier for my brain anyway, to kind of get into that pattern. So, I'm going to go in here. So we have this chart and it's already set up so that I can quickly jump in and kind of show you some of this. But, you know, some of the tools we've introduced, we've got these Magic Markers, the ability to find and recognize the chart and be able to have it all set up for you is another thing that we've added over the past couple of years that really has turned the ability to set up your own pattern and use it with any pattern. It's been really easy. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to go into setup up at the top. And I'm just going to tap the blue plus on the side. And I'm going to say I want to make a chart piece. And I'm going to pick a chart. This pattern has several. And I'm just going to kind of outline where that chart is on the page. And in this case, I probably don't even need to outline it, but sometimes you get a page that has 3 or 4 charts on it. So you just kind of outline to select the one you want. Then down at the bottom, you tap the wand. And the app, basically, after I tapped the wand, it found the edges of the chart for me. And then it also identified all the rows and columns and drew this kind of red grid around that. So I look at it now, it's my job as a human, because humans are always smarter than the computer. It's my job to make sure that lines up. And it does. That lines up really nicely. And now, basically, I have, that's the same as the other chart we had before, but I have that chart. Now, it doesn't have the reminders on it and things like that, but I have that chart fully set up. And now I can add the magic markers to it. And, you know, we talked about magic markers for being able to count the purl stitches before your cable. Well, cables and other wide stitches is another thing that kind of, you know, sometimes there can be a lot of different combinations. And being able to colorize the stitches can really help your brain understand the stitches. So like I can come in here, and if I go to magic markers, I can select the whole cable. So I'm just dragging to outline. That's a 2x2 right cross. I tap the wand and it identifies all of those 2x2 right crosses for me. And now I can make them any color I want. So maybe I want my 2x2 right crosses, they're right crosses, so I want them to be red. And I can just continue to do that for each of the different combos of different styles of cables that are in this, so that my cables can be color coded. So again, just a way to, if it makes it easier for you to have those cables color coded, it's a way to be able to do that and to do it quickly. You don't have to sit there with a colored pencil and color them all in or anything like that. It's just highlight one, tap the wand, and it finds all the rest of them. So yeah.
And it's actually like the fact that you have the legend underneath of the chart that makes it so much easier, because like if you print it, you have to go find that page where you printed the explanation of those cables. So,
and just wait until later this spring. The cool thing we're going to have, I can't, but Irina, I'll come back and do like a little 10-minute for you after we release it, because it's going to be like, you're going to be like, oh my gosh. And it's Beth's feature that I talked about earlier in our pregame. We were at Vogue, and a customer who's been a customer for a really long time came up and showed me a thing she did with cables specifically. But she showed me this thing that she did, and it was a lot of work for her to do it, but it made such a difference for her to be able to knit that pattern and keep track of the 17 different types of cables and the instructions for them. And so I'm super excited to be able to show that in a few months. So
that sounds great.
Coming soon, some exciting things around coloring and magic markers and reminders and things like that. So yeah.
Well, how about like if you knitting some pattern with written instructions and the phone rings and you have to run somewhere, how do you mark where you are at?
Yeah. So like right here, you know, this is our inverted marker, which everybody loves. Almost everybody loves it. It makes the current row bright. But then like this is pretty complicated. So where am I if I have to drop everything? So this kind of blue line just kind of slides back and forth, and it's on every page, has one of these blue lines, and you can use it to mark where you are along the row. And then there's also a you are here marker, which I'll actually use down here in this chart. So oh, I don't even have all the cables in here. Okay, but I'll use it down here in this chart. So the you are here marker, you can just touch and hold. It's that kind of red diamond, and you can put it anywhere. And of course you can put it up here in the chart too if you want. So if you have to work from like 2 spots at the same time and you don't want to go through setup and all that kind of stuff, you've got a row marker, you've got we call this a sliding stitch marker that you can put, and then you've also got this you are here red diamond that you can use to just quickly mark a spot on your page.
Right. Okay, what else
What else? Well, so let's take a look at color work, because you are at Vogue, and so you know one of the things that we've started talking about, and so I talked earlier about how hard marketing is, and one of the things that's hard for me is coming up with like taglines. So at Vogue, we were brainstorming with everyone who came up to the booth, and so we'll call it magic swatching. So I'd like to show you what magic swatching looks like, and it's actually still magic markers, but we've put some capabilities into magic markers to make basically magic swatching easier. So here we have a 2-color chart. This is from Carolyn Lizzle. We were showing this chart at Vogue as well. So it's this kind of 2-color Dizzy Diamond chart.
Yep.
And I can go in and just like we used magic markers to find our pearls and our cables, we can also use magic markers to find, count, and color work charts, whether they're black and white or multiple colors, or even if they're symbol-based color work charts. So I'll go ahead and tap the wand. And here it's kind of got and turned except for one. So I'll slide it to more and tap the wand again. So here it's turned all of those white stitches to red. And I'm just going to name this stitch white because it's going to keep our life a little easier in a second. And I'm going to do that again for the black stitches. So I'll go ahead and select a sample of a black stitch. Maybe we'll make that yellow and tap the wand. So now we can see all the yellow stitches. And let's see. So I'm just going to rename this one black so we can see. Okay. So we can see the white stitches. We can see the black stitches. But for magic swatching, what we added is this show all option. And that lets us see all the markers we've defined together. So I look at this and go, wow, that's a super hideous combination. Maybe let's not do that. So maybe instead of yellow, I want the black to be pink. And now I can see exactly what that looks like. And maybe I want to go ahead and make that blue. And I can start seeing, I've maybe gone to my stash and pulled a bunch of yarn that I have that's just in stash, maybe even partial skeins. And I can say, oh, what does it look like if I do the colors this way? What does it look like if I do the colors that way? We can start getting into stuff like color theory. So this is this kind of green and pink, but what if we swap those and do it the other way, right? So same colors, but we swapped their position. And you like one, you don't like the other, right? So you can go ahead and start playing with it. And then since you're pulling from stash and maybe you've got partial skeins, you know what they weigh, but you know it's not like a full 100 grams. We can't give you yardage estimates because that's too much focused on gauge. But what we can tell you is it tells you how many marked stitches there are. So the black stitches, which are currently the green ones, there's 257 of those in this motif. Mm-hmm. And the white one has 393. So I at least have a relative proportion. I'm going to need more of whatever color I pick for the white stitches, which in this case is pink, than I'm going to need for the green. So I need to make sure I've got more pink than green, right? And so we call this magic swatching because it lets you play with your color combinations in pattern. And I can't emphasize the in pattern part of this enough. So there's an app out there that lets you pick the colors for your pattern and it gives you circles, but it doesn't tell you where in the pattern motif each of those circles goes. So how would you ever use that? So we call this magic swatching. And it's great because you can just play and play and play until you come up with a combination that makes you happy, that pleases you, that is the way that you want it to look.
Just tell me one thing, with all those options on the app to play with, do you actually have time to knit?
Yeah, so it's funny. I knit this. So I do have time to knit and I knit quite a lot. It's better. I talked earlier about how I carried, 80 plus hours a week for a few years while we were getting Knit Companion off the ground. So now I do have time to knit. I generally try to knit, in the evenings. I actually can't sit and watch TV without falling asleep unless I'm also knitting. So I know a lot of people have that. So I tend to kind of knit in the evenings and I try to set some time aside on the weekend to knit as well. I do a lot of outdoor activities on the weekends, but I try to always set some time aside to knit on the weekends. And I'm a spinner too, so I spin. And I have been neglecting spinning. I honestly have. And so I had a friend who said, instead of saying on Tuesday, all I'm gonna do is spin, or Saturday or whatever, I'm gonna spin in a 2-hour block, because that I don't like spinning for too long. Kind of sitting in the same place and spinning for too long. And so she's like, my new thing is I'm going to spin 15 minutes a day, 10 or 15 minutes a day, but every day, and see what happens. So that was last week. And I was like, oh, that's such a good idea. I'm definitely going to do that. I haven't actually started it yet. So you'll have to hold me accountable as to whether I do my 10 minutes of spinning later today. But I haven't
I've heard
started
a
it yet,
lot
but
of
that's my
people. I've
plan.
heard a lot of people actually do that, and some of them say that it's like part of their morning meditation when they
Mm-hmm.
spin, they let their mind drift. So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
combine it with the morning routine.
Maybe I can, when I'm drinking my coffee in the morning, because I'm usually just sitting there, like staring out the window, drinking my coffee, petting the dogs. That is a good time to pick up and do my 10 minutes. I'll definitely try that.
Well, when you go to the festivals, and you mentioned that at the beginning it was tough, like to hear critique and stuff. When you go to the festival, do you also get this positive energy from people who come to your booth?
Yeah. And there's not a lot of negative. There's every once in a while someone's a little negative at a festival, but it's nothing like online. It's nothing like online. I think there's something different when they realize there's a person on the other side of it, which technology's kind of insulated us from understanding. So I get a ton of positive energy from the festivals. I really do. And, having Beth come up and show me this super cool thing she did, it's been a long time since a customer has showed me, like, I was like, oh my gosh, that's groundbreaking. But there's so much positive feedback. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned AI briefly, and that's not the type of AI. Are you concerned
Yeah.
about like future technological advances and how it's going to affect Meet Companion?
So to the extent that people are like, oh, you can just ask AI to write the code for you. And no, that's not a thing. Not right now, anyway. I always worry because I don't think technology is good or neutral or bad or horribly evil. I think technology is a tool, and you can use technology for good in your life, and you can use it for terrible things, and it can be pretty neutral. So it's how we all choose as a society to use the technology. So social media fundamentally isn't bad, but it's kind of caused problems, right? With lots of stuff. So it's how we use it. So I do get a lot of feedback from people who are like, I don't want tech in my life. I'm going to stick to paper and pencil because I don't want tech in my life. So my only thing with that is, and that's fine. That's like a personal choice, and it's totally cool when people want to disconnect from the screen. But my thing is using your iPad for Knit Companion to make your life so much easier and to be able to more deeply enjoy the fabric that you're making and the craft that you're working on. Being able to do that and have that as a tool is enriching your life. You're not doom scrolling, right? You're not absorbing all this negative energy that we've been talking about. You're doing something that's positively helping your life. And you're actually looking at your knitting, and you're only glancing up at your iPad for the instructions, and then you're looking back at your knitting. And so I think that's a very different use of technology than, say, doom scrolling for hours and hours on whatever your social media of choice is. And so I don't really think about technology as being bad. But back to your question, do I worry about the future? I do. And because you never know what choices people are going to make. And sometimes the easy choice isn't always the best choice. And so I worry about that kind of stuff. But ultimately, you just have to know that ultimately, eventually, people are gonna circle the wagons and
Well,
make a good choice. I see a lot of people ditching social media right now, so I'm happy about that. But
when you talked about your husband back when you came to him and told him that you have to make a choice, and he was
yeah.
very supportive of your choice back then, what does he think of you now? Is he very proud?
Oh yeah, and he comes. So anyone who was at Vogue, did you meet him? So he was the big guy. And so he comes, he helps me with the booth and stuff. So he has his own full-time job, but he gets a kick out of going. He thinks it's just the most fabulous thing, that people come and enjoy, and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's been super beneficial for both of us to be able to see that you can do something like this and actually have it become a viable path forward for your life, right?
So when you first started, your vision was that your target audience was those like super savvy, experienced knitters.
Yeah.
Who is your target audience today?
So it's really anyone. You need basic skills. You need to be able to cast on, you need to be able to knit and purl, and you need to be to the point where you picked up a pattern and you want to make that thing. And once you're at that level where you pick up a pattern and you want to make that thing, that everyone from there all the way through to super advanced, I knit brioche in the dark and have no trouble, all of that spectrum of people are really at this point my target audience. Because what we saw with the tools is it takes that, which row am I on, how many stitches do I have, it takes all of that tough stuff, flipping pages to find the key because I can't remember what that stitch symbol is because it's a knit two together or is it an SSK and I can't keep them straight yet because I'm brand new to lace. It makes that easy. It makes it easy. So now you can focus on how do I do a knit two together, not what is a knit two together. And it really takes away all of that tracking so you can really focus.
Well, I'm waiting to have you back when the new feature is coming out, and I wish you most success in it. And I want to thank you for being my guest today and sharing a little bit about your app and showing my viewers how they can use it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I hope your audience enjoys this, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So
Thanks
thank
so much.
you.
Thank you, so. Thank you.
Yep.